Hi everyone, and welcome to The Sleepy Scientist. I'm really happy you're here. Tonight, we're going to go on a calm and quiet trip to learn something amazing. So get comfy, take a deep breath, and let's enjoy this peaceful science story together. Before we start, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it for you right now? If you like relaxing science videos, don't forget to tap the like button. Now let's begin. The forest grows slower after sunset, but it does not stop. When the sun slips behind the hills and the last hot edges of day soften into blue, leaves become cool skin and the air between trunks turns gentle and thick. You can almost feel the trees let out a long, soft breath. In daylight, they are full of bright work, catching photons and pulling in carbon dioxide, weaving sugar from light. At night, another kind of work continues, smaller and quieter, like the hush of a sleeping chest. Leaves open and close tiny mouths called stomata, and through these pores the forest breathes, less loudly than in day, but still alive, still aware, still trading with the sky. Imagine standing at the edge of a clearing where the canopy breaks and the moon spreads a pale road across the understory. Each leaf carries a film of cool air right on its surface, a thin blanket called the boundary layer. In the day it is stirred and stripped by winds and heat, but at night it thickens and rests, so gases move more slowly, voices hush, and the forest conversations become private. Through the stomata, oxygen and carbon dioxide glide back and forth. In daylight, carbon dioxide flows in as leaves cook light into sugar and release oxygen. After dusk, the recipe flips. Photosynthesis sleeps. Respiration, the steady burning of sugar for energy, goes on. Oxygen slips inward for the quiet fire of life, and carbon dioxide drifts outward into the night air pooling near the ground. The word breathing is only a bridge, a gentle picture for a deeper process. Trees do not have lungs, but their leaves open gates that feel like lungs when you watch the flow. Stomata look like tiny lips under a microscope along by two curved guard cells that swell or soften like held or released breaths. When water fills these guard cells, they plump and pull the pore open. When water leaves them, the pore closes like an eyelid. Chemical messengers help choose the timing. A hormone called abscisic acid whispers for closure when the leaf is thirsty. Ions move, water follows, the guard cells relax, and the pore becomes a thin seam. Other signals call for opening when the leaf is ready to trade again. Even in darkness, the pattern is not random. The leaf's inner clock, tuned by past days of light, keeps time through the night, so that opening and closing follows a rhythm like a sleeping pulse. Moonlight is faint compared to day, yet it still touches the forest in soft ways. Pale photons brush cells that can sense light's colour and presence. In the day, blue light and red light guide stomata and tell leaves about morning and noon. At night, the moon's light is delicate and often too weak to fuel any real photosynthesis in most forests. Yet the clock inside the plant remembers yesterday's sun and tomorrow's dawn. Even with the moon hidden, the stomata continue their rhythm, proof that the leaf is listening inward as much as outward. Imagine a drummer tapping a beat in the dark when the band is silent. That is the circadian rhythm of a leaf, self-kept time, shaped by the yesterday's light, carrying through the night. Breathe slowly and think about the air itself as it changes. At night, the forest air cools and sinks. Near the ground, a shallow sea of cooler air gathers like mist you cannot see. Carbon dioxide from soil and from leaf respiration collects in this gentle basin, rising in concentration close to the forest floor. Up above, between branches, flows ease and sometimes stop. Without the daytime mixing, the air becomes layered and still. The forest is not a single lung. It is a million small exchanges drifting through trapped pools and quiet currents. If you could walk with an invisible lantern that painted carbon dioxide as silver smoke, you would see it swirl around ferns and roots pooling in hollows, slipping slowly between trunks, then lifting again when a small wind passes or when dawn's warmth stirs the air. In some plants, especially those adapted to dry places, night brings a special trick. They gather carbon dioxide when the air is cool and the danger of losing water is smaller. This path, called CAM, opens stomata mostly at night, stores carbon as an acid in leaf cells, and saves it for the day to build sugar under a closed door. Desert cacti and some orchids use this rhythm, breathing in the dark to drink less from their own small wells. Forest giants in wetter lands usually follow other paths, opening stomata widely by day and resting them more at night. But even there, the pattern changes with weather, season, and thirst. On heavy nights after hot days, a forest may still let a small river of water leave through leaves. This nocturnal transpiration is gentle but real, a sigh that eases pressure in stems, helps move minerals, and keeps tissues supple enough for repair. If you listen to the stems, you might hear another hidden sound, the whisper of water columns held in narrow tubes. The xylem carries water upward, not by pumps, but by the pull of evaporation and the sticky love between water molecules. In the day, the draw is strong as leaves pull water out through stomata, tugging chains of molecules up from the soil. At night, the pull eases, tensions relax. In some species, tiny pressures in roots rise under the cover of darkness, pushing water upward with a slow kindness. Sometimes droplets appear at leaf edges before dawn, shimmering like tears. This is guttation, the quiet pushing out of sap when roots press and air is damp and still. It is not the same as dew, which is born from air condensing on cool surfaces. Guttation is the plant's own pulse, safe and sober, a sign that even while it seems to sleep, there is movement inside. Within the leaf, sugar made by day begins its night journey. The phloem, a different set of living pipes, runs like soft roads from leaf to root and bark, carrying sweetness to places that cannot make their own. At night, the work of transport continues, perhaps even with fewer traffic jams, because the leaf is not flooded by fresh sugar from bright noon. Enzymes trim long chains of starch into smaller sugars, gentle bites that fit the stream. Here too, a clock keeps careful time, so the leaf uses just enough of its stored starch to last until dawn, rarely running out, rarely wasting. It is a small lesson in trust. The tree believes morning will come and meters its meal with quiet wisdom. Repair hums in the dark. Sunlight brings power, but also small wounds. Reactive sparks, tugs on fragile proteins, tiny cracks in the water pipes when midday becomes too dry. Night is a workshop where these are mended. Proteins fold back into proper shapes. Membranes rest. The photosynthetic machinery, the green factories within chloroplasts, are tuned, aligned and readied for the next day's light. In some species, embolisms, little pockets of air that break the water chain, can shrink in darkness when tension eases and soluble gases slip back into liquid. The details differ from tree to tree, but the idea is simple. Night is not wasted time. It is care time. The forest nurses itself. There are signals moving you cannot see, sugars are signals, hormones drift, Even a molecule called melatonin, famous in animals for linking night to sleep, lives in plants too, where it helps calm oxidative storms and guides rhythms. The forest's chemistry is a web, and at night fewer arrows fly, but they fly with more purpose. Volatile compounds, the small perfumes leaves release, change their mix after sunset. The hot breath of day carries strong reactive scents. The cool breath of night leans softer, sometimes resinous, sometimes quiet, shaping the invisible talk between plants, insects, and the sky. Some moths find flowers by these night perfumes. Some predators trace their prey by following faint trails. Even microbes are listening, adjusting their own busy work on barks and in soils to the changed language of the dark. Underground, roots continue their slow exchange with soil. They sip water and minerals from spaces between grains, pass sugars outward to partners, and sense the chemistry of the earth like fingers reading braille. With the heat turned down at night, the water film around soil particles thickens, and roots can sometimes drink more easily. Around them stretch fungal threads, mycorrhizae, that sew tree to tree and root to resource. In darkness, the traffic along these threads goes on. Sugars paid to fungi, minerals and signals returned, warnings passed when a leaf was bitten earlier in the day, plans adjusted for morning. The forest is not a set of strangers, it is a neighbourhood. At night the porches glow softly and voices drop, but the neighbourly help does not end. Now let your thoughts drift back to the moon, sitting low, pulling on oceans, lifting and lowering tides. The water inside trees does not rise and fall like the sea, yet the world's cycles press on everything. Temperature dips, pressure changes, insects change their shift, birds still, small mammals begin their errands. The forest's breathing adjusts to these changes, not to the moon itself so much as to the suite of nightly cues that arrive together. The result is a weave of tiny effects, stomata tracking the leaf's inner clock, boundary layers thickening, air pooling, root pressure nudging, and sugars flowing. Added together, they make the hush you feel when you stand among trunks and hear nothing but sense living motion all around. Think of the scale. A single leaf might trade only a breath's worth of carbon and water in a few heartbeats, but a tree wears thousands upon thousands of leaves. A forest wears billions. Even the gentle nighttime exchange adds up to fogs of breath drifting along slopes and into valleys, feeding soil life, feeding the next day's flow, feeding the story of the climate above. On some nights the air becomes saturated in the canopy, so that by dawn, dew jewelled along needles and broadleaves returns a little of last evening's vapour to the green. These tiny returns, these small loops, keep systems stable. Slow breaths prevent shocks. When dawn is still far away and the night has deepened, the forest's energy sinks to a low, steady flame. Trees do not waste, they do not rush. They pace their burning so smoothly that by the time the first birds test the air with single notes, there is still fuel for repair, still sweetness for roots, still patience in the system. The air near the ground may hold high carbon dioxide then, a cushion ready to be thinned by morning winds. The leaves may have closed their pores to slits, or they may hold them partially open to keep the soft currents moving. It depends on species, weather, and water. There is no one rule, only careful choices woven by evolution into each body. You can almost feel the promise of morning inside this dark breath. The sugars being shipped now will strengthen new rings of wood, build spring leaves and feed fungi that in return feed the tree. The oxygen taken in will help power the making and mending that keep cells clear and safe. The carbon dioxide released will gather low, then be gathered again when day arrives and the green factories wake to start their bright labour. Night is a circle inside a larger circle. The forest breathes out what it will later bring back in, trading with the air in a long kind rhythm. If you close your eyes, the details settle into a single picture. A leaf with 1,000 small mouths, a stem with quiet water, roots touching damp soil like gentle hands, threads of fungus like moonlit hair, air pooling and lifting as if it had weight you could cradle, a clock ticking in every cell. Every part is small, but together they make the calm body of a living dark. When the wind rises, that body sways and the boundary layers thin. When the wind stills, it gathers around each leaf again and the breath slows. When a cloud uncovers the moon, the silver grows brighter, but the inner beat does not change. The forest is faithful to its own time, and then, closer to dawn, the pattern begins to turn. The leaf's clock expects light. Guard cells begin to court the idea of opening wide again. Starch stores approach the line they meant to reach. Not a crumb earlier, not a crumb late. Water paths ready for the day's pull. Membranes check their seams. Enzymes line up for the cascade that will start when photons strike. Night has not just been time without light. It has been preparation, study, and soft breath. Soon the trade will flip again. Carbon in, oxygen out, sugars woven fast. And the hush will become a hum, but for one last moment the forest rests in its gentle balance, breathing inward, breathing outward. A soft chest under a pale sky. A lullaby in wood and leaf and air. If you could drift higher now, up past the first tier of branches into the deep architecture of the canopy, the night breath of the forest would feel different. Here, where the leaves tangle like woven nets, and every gap is a small window to the stars, air lingers longer. The moonlight makes a patchwork, silvering some leaves while others hide in black shadow. From above, the forest appears to sleep, but if you leaned close to a single leaf, you would still hear the quiet hiss of gases moving, oxygen slipping in, carbon dioxide drifting out, the faintest trace of water vapor escaping like a secret exhale. This is respiration, steady and unhurried, the same in the darkness as in your own body when you sleep. The energy it fuels feeds not movement but maintenance, keeps the cells alive, repairs what daylight frayed, and holds the patterns that morning will need. The canopy is more than just a roof, it is a shifting skin of the forest. Even at night, small winds travel its corridors, stirred by the temperature differences between open spaces and shaded ones, between treetops and valleys below. Sometimes those winds sink in warm, pulling, cooler air upward from the ground, and with it, the scents and signals of the understory. This is how some night-blooming flowers call to their pollinators, perfume sent upward like a beacon. The stomata in the canopy sense more than just gas levels. They respond to humidity, to the dryness of wind, to subtle vibrations in pressure that hint at coming weather. Their behaviour in darkness is as much about preparing for change as it is about conserving water. For a leaf hundreds of feet above the forest floor, a sudden wind at night can mean a quick drying, so it might close its pores sooner, trading gas exchange for safety. Deeper within the canopy, where leaves overlap and moonlight rarely reaches, the rhythm shifts again. Here, the air is damp and cool, held in place by layers of foliage that slow any mixing. Carbon dioxide builds up from the combined respiration of countless leaves and branches. Some of this gas slips into the metabolism of mosses or shade-loving plants that can work at lower light levels, ready to make use of the earliest glimmers of dawn. Others simply let it gather, knowing it will be swept away when morning brings stronger currents. In this space, breathing is not about immediate exchange, it is about waiting. Energy use slows, repair work is steady, and the pace of life is set not by the clock in the sky, but by the clock inside each cell. The circadian rhythm that ticks, whether the moon is bright or the night is black. Roots, though far below, feel this change in pace. The sugars made yesterday are travelling through phloem channels toward them now, pulled by differences in concentration, moving in living pipelines that are narrow yet astonishingly efficient. Each molecule of sugar is the work of thousands of photons caught by the leaves during the day, now being sent to feed growth at the tips of roots or stored in woody tissues for seasons to come. The forest's night breath is tied to this stream. The oxygen taken in by leaves is also drawn in by roots, which need it to burn their share of sugars and fuel their work. In waterlogged soils where oxygen is scarce, roots switch to slower, less efficient energy pathways, producing substances that can even become toxic if they linger too long. This is one reason forests breathe differently in wet seasons than in dry. Too much stillness below can choke the life out of roots, just as too much dryness above can parch the leaves. Between the roots and leaves lies the trunk, a living column through which signals pass in both directions. The water pulled up during the day may slow or stop at night, but messages in the form of electrical pulses, hormones, and pressure changes still travel. These signals can take minutes or hours to reach their destinations, but they are constant, part of a conversation that never sleeps. Some tell leaves to adjust their pores. Others inform roots about the moisture level in the canopy. Even at night, the tree is integrating all of this, its own needs, the conditions of the air and soil, the memory of the day just past, to decide how to breathe, how to spend energy, how to prepare for tomorrow's light. The moon, though too dim to power much photosynthesis, still plays a role. Its light can influence the behaviour of nocturnal insects, some of which feed on leaves or carry pollen between flowers. In turn, this activity can subtly alter how plants manage their defences at night, shifting chemical profiles to deter herbivores or to attract allies. Some studies suggest that certain plants may keep their stomata slightly more open during bright moonlit nights, perhaps as a way to balance defense and respiration when conditions are mild. Whether or not the moon directly changes gas exchange, it shapes the ecosystem in which these exchanges take place, adding one more layer to the forest's complex nighttime physiology. The stillness you feel walking through a night forest is, in truth, full of micro-motions. Water molecules climb cell walls, enzymes twist and fold in chloroplasts, mending the machinery that sunlight stressed. Cell walls are loosened in some places, allowing tiny expansions that, over weeks and months, become growth. Even the night air moves in ways almost too subtle to feel. A gentle downslope drift here, a thermal swirl there. In this slow choreography, every breath from every leaf is part of a larger flow. The oxygen exhaled by a tree's roots in saturated soil rises to feed nearby organisms. The carbon dioxide from leaf respiration can fuel a nearby fern's early morning photosynthesis. These loops are tight, local, and constant. If you could shrink yourself and step into the thin space right at the surface of a leaf, the night breath would be more tangible. You would stand between two guard cells, each curved and tensed according to the plant's need. Behind you, the dark interior of the leaf, rich with stored sugars and ready enzymes. Ahead, the cool air holding a thin film of moisture. Molecules would drift past you in both directions, some slipping in to fuel the leaf's own respiration, others sliding out, carrying the waste carbon from energy burned. Occasionally, a small vapor molecule of water would join the outward stream, part of a tiny, slow transpiration that never fully stops. This is what it means for a tree to breathe under the moon. Not a single deep inhale and exhale, but millions of microscopic exchanges, each essential, each quiet. Some of the forest's breath also moves through its bark. While bark is often thought of as a sealed armour, many trees have tiny openings called lenticles, which allow gases to pass between inner tissues and the outside air. At night, these lenticels are part of the respiratory network, letting oxygen in and carbon dioxide out from the living cells in the outer layers of the trunk and branches. The flow here is slower than through leaves, but it matters, especially in seasons when leaves are few or absent. In winter forests, lenticel breathing may be the main way woody tissues exchange gases with the atmosphere, carrying the rhythm of respiration through months of rest. Even the soil beneath the forest floor is part of this breathing. At night, the cooling ground slows the activity of some microbes, while others thrive in the damp, oxygen-rich pockets near roots. The carbon dioxide released here can be many times more concentrated than in the air above, rising through leaf litter in invisible currents. On still nights, this carbon-rich air may settle in hollows, creating tiny microclimates that persist until the first stirring winds of morning. In these pockets, the composition of the air is different. Less oxygen, more carbon dioxide, more humidity. Plants growing in such places adapt their breathing accordingly, opening stomata differently, or relying on stored gases to get them through until the air refreshes. This night-long conversation between soil, roots, trunks, leaves and air is not uniform. It changes with species, with season, with the age of the tree, with the memory of drought or storm. A young sapling may breathe more rapidly at night, fueling faster growth, while an old giant slows its rhythms to conserve. Trees at the edge of a forest, exposed to wind and temperature swings, may manage their pores more cautiously than those sheltered in the centre. Each choice, whether to open, to close, to burn sugar quickly or slowly, is a piece of the forest's strategy for survival. When you step back from the details, you see that breathing under the moon is as much about connection as it is about chemistry. The oxygen a tree draws in may help it repair a torn leaf, but that same oxygen, released later by another part of the tree, may keep a fungus alive that will, in turn, decompose fallen wood and feed the soil. The carbon dioxide from a leaf's nighttime respiration may, hours later, be the very molecule that a blade of grass uses to spin sugar in the first light of day. This is the quiet economy of the forest, where nothing is truly lost, only passed along, transformed and woven back into the living whole. By the time the sky begins to pale in the east, the forest's breathing has subtly shifted. The stomata begin to stir, opening a little wider in anticipation of the first photons. The flow of gases changes direction. Carbon dioxide now flooding inward, oxygen pouring outward in the first sparks of photosynthesis. But for a few lingering minutes, the two modes, night's inward breath and day's outward sigh, exist together, a gentle overlap in which the forest holds both past and future in the same cool air. The moon still hangs above the trees, and the night's work, repair, exchange, preparation, lies complete. Morning will bring the hum of full photosynthesis, but the memory of the moonlit breathing will remain, stored in sugars, in healed cells, in the steady pulse of roots and leaves that never stopped, not even in the deepest dark. As the horizon begins to soften, the last breaths of the night still linger in the forest's chest. The air near the ground remains cool and slightly heavy, holding a ghost of the carbon dioxide that pooled there during the long hours of darkness. Up in the canopy, dew clings to leaf edges and the fine hairs of twigs, tiny spheres that magnify the first pale light sliding between branches. It is a tender moment, one that feels as though the entire forest is taking a slow, thoughtful inhale before the full chorus of daylight begins. The night's breathing has been a quiet balance between taking in oxygen and letting go of carbon dioxide. But with the approach of dawn, the flow begins to turn like the tide meeting an incoming current. The leaves, guided by the invisible hands of their inner clocks, start to open their stomata more widely. This is not an abrupt act, but a gradual widening, as if each pore is stretching awake. The guard cells, responding to the light-sensitive pigments deep within the leaf, swell with water, curving into the shapes that create an open passage. Blue wavelengths in the early sunlight are particularly powerful triggers, nudging these cells toward readiness. Even before the sun itself crests the horizon, scattered light from the sky is enough to signal the change. The forest breath shifts from a night of inward oxygen flow to the day's outward rush, from burning stored sugars to weaving new ones from the air. Yet the transition is not just chemical, it is ecological. Nocturnal animals retreat, their movements slowing as they find rest, while diurnal creatures begin to stir. The breathing of the forest is woven with theirs. For every exhale from a fox slipping back to its den carries the carbon dioxide that a sapling will soon take in. Moths that spent the night feeding on nectar withdraw to hidden leaves, leaving behind the pollen that will feed a seed. The plants, in turn, offer fresh oxygen to the waking birds that fill the air with first calls. In this overlap between night and day, the exchanges of gases are part of a broader exchange of life, each breath supporting another. The night's repairs have left the leaves renewed. Proteins in the chloroplasts, damaged by the intensity of the previous day's sunlight, have been replaced or reassembled. Membranes that had loosened in heat have regained their structure, ready to hold their content steady through another round of photosynthesis. The tiny water columns in the xylem, relaxed overnight by the reduced tension, are now poised to stretch upward again. Roots, having received their ration of sugars through the night, have strengthened their tips for new growth and stored surplus energy in the form of starch within their cells. It is as though the forest has polished its tools in the dark, preparing them for the day's work. Not every night is the same in the breathing life of a forest. In dry seasons, trees may keep their stomata tighter even at night, guarding their water with fierce care. This means less oxygen drawn in for respiration and slower sugar burning, a deliberate choice to match their energy needs with the safety of their water reserves. In rainy periods, when humidity wraps the leaves like a blanket, stomata may remain more open, allowing a freer exchange even under the moon. Seasonal rhythms blend with nightly ones, and each species carries its own strategy. A tropical rainforest giant may breathe with a steady constancy year-round, while a temperate deciduous tree shifts its patterns dramatically between summer's full canopy and winter's bare branches. The soil's contribution to the night's breath is equally variable. In warm months, microbial activity is higher, and respiration from roots and decomposers alike sends carbon dioxide streaming upward through the leaf litter. This can lead to higher nighttime concentrations near the ground, sometimes more than twice the level of the air above the canopy. In colder months, the breathing of the soil slows, and the balance between plant and microbial respiration changes. Snow cover can trap gases in the soil's upper layers, so that when a thaw comes, there is a sudden flush of carbon dioxide released into the forest air. Even these bursts become part of the system's larger breathing cycle, folded into the patterns of uptake and release that sustain the ecosystem. There is an understated elegance to the fact that the forest breathes not just for itself, but for all the lives that depend on it. The oxygen released in the day will travel far beyond the treetops, carried by winds across landscapes and oceans. The carbon stored in trunks, branches and roots was once part of another forest's breath in another time. In this way, each night's respiration links to centuries of life and death, to cycles that stretch far beyond a single moonrise and moonset. The forest breathing under the moon is both an immediate physical act and a thread in the endless fabric of Earth's atmosphere. As the sun's first rays slip through the canopy, the moon fades, its influence still present in the memory of the night, but giving way to the urgency of day. Photosynthesis accelerates, stomata open wide, and the cool, carbon-rich air near the ground begins to lift and mix. The gentle boundary layers around leaves thin as temperature rises and winds stir, speeding the exchange of gases. The night's balance tilts completely into the day's surge, and the forest's chest, which has been quietly rising and falling through hours of darkness, now expands with light. And yet there is something about the night breath that lingers in the mind. It is the reminder that life is not only about action, about the visible work of building and growing, but also about rest, repair, and the invisible currents that keep everything alive between those bursts of activity. In the moon's company, the forest's breathing is a meditation, a slow and measured act that holds the weight of continuity. Every quiet inhale of oxygen in the dark fuels the next day's bloom. Every gentle exhale of carbon dioxide is a gift to the surrounding world, ready to be taken up when the light returns. If you stand again in the same clearing where the night began, you will notice that the silver light has been replaced by gold. The trunks are warm to the touch now, the air smells greener, and the soundscape is different. Birds, insects, and the faint rustle of leaves waking to the wind. But beneath this change, the same cycles continue. Tonight, when the sun fades and the moon rises again, the stomata will listen to their clocks, the leaves will resume their inward breathing, the roots will draw their quiet drink, and the forest will once again slip into its soft, moonlit rhythm. In that return there is a constancy as deep as the soil and as patient as the stars. Breathing under the moon is not a pause in life, it is life in its most deliberate form. It is the patient weaving of continuity, the unseen stitching between day and day. It is proof that the forest's vitality is not measured only in the bright work of photosynthesis, but also in the calm labour of night, where every exchange of gases, every ripple in the xylem, every movement of sugar is a note in the endless, wordless song of survival. This song has been sung for millions of years, long before any human stood in a clearing to listen, and it will go on as long as there are leaves to lift toward the moon and roots to anchor them to the earth. And so, as day fully claims the sky, the silent lungs of the forest settle into their sunlit rhythm. but the memory of their moonlit breathing stays, a quiet knowledge tucked within each cell, ready to guide them when the light fades once more. In the stillness of the coming night, they will return to that gentle pulse, the slow and steady exchange that holds the forest together, one breath at a time beneath the endless watch of the moon. In the stillness of the forest night, while the moon drapes its soft light across the canopy, a different kind of river runs, one that does not glitter on the surface or rush with noise, but instead winds invisibly through living tissue. These are the streams of phloem, the hidden roads beneath the bark, carrying the forest's currency of sugar from the places where it was made to the places where it is most needed. The leaves are the mills of daylight, catching sunlight and turning it into chemical treasure. And when the sun sets, these treasures begin their journey, slipping into the narrow sieve tubes that make up the phloem's pathways. Here, in the calm of the night, this transport is steady and patient, a current driven not by the pull of gravity or the push of wind, but by differences in concentration, a pressure flow born from the very sweetness it carries. Imagine peeling back the layers of a tree's bark, not to harm it, but to see the living tissue beneath. Just inside lies the phloem, a slender band where sugar-rich sap moves under gentle pressure. Each sieve tube is lined with companion cells that act like caretakers, loading sugars in, managing nutrients, and maintaining the delicate machinery of transport. The process begins in the leaves, where photosynthesis has filled cells with sucrose. At night, photosynthesis rests, but the leaves are far from idle. They open their reserves, breaking down starch stored during the day and feeding sucrose into the phloem. The concentration here at the source is high, and so water flows in from nearby xylem vessels, swelling the sieve tubes and creating pressure that pushes the sap along. This flow is not random, it is directed, guided by the needs of the tree. The sugars move towards sinks, growing roots pushing deeper into the soil, developing buds wrapped tight against the chill, wounded tissues calling for repair, storage cells in the trunk and roots preparing for leaner seasons. In the dark, with no competing draw from photosynthesis, the flow can move more evenly to distant parts. Roots, in particular, are busy at night, absorbing minerals, expanding their tips, and sending signals upward. The sugar they receive is the fuel for this work, each molecule carrying the sunlight of a day now past. The speed of phloem flow can be astonishing, centimeters per minute in some species, yet the movement is so smooth, so free of turbulence, that it makes no sound we can hear. If you could stand within a sieve tube, the sap would slide past you like a slow, endless tide, carrying not just sugars but amino acids, hormones, and even tiny fragments of RNA, messengers between distant parts of the plant. These signals are part of the forest's night language, a way for a leaf to tell a root about conditions above, or for a root to send word of minerals found deep in the soil. In this way, the phloem is not just a transport system, it is a living communication network. The nighttime journey of sugars is also a journey of balance. During the day, some of the sugar made in leaves is used immediately, burned in respiration to power cell activity. At night, without sunlight, the demand for stored sugars increases, and the phloem delivers them from the leaf to the rest of the plant. The leaves themselves keep enough for their own night breathing, carefully rationed so they do not run out before dawn. This is no guesswork. Plants have an internal arithmetic, a way of pacing the breakdown of starch so that it lasts exactly until morning. If the night is longer than usual, as in winter, they slow their rate of use. If it is shorter, they adjust in the opposite directions. It is an ancient, quiet precision. Walking through a moonlit forest, you might not sense this hidden movement, yet its effects are everywhere. Roots thickening with reserves that will feed spring growth, bark tissues mending small cracks, fungi in partnership with trees receiving a share of the sugar in exchange for minerals gathered from far underground. Even leaves that will fall in the coming season are fed in their final days, their sugars reabsorbed and stored before they drift down to the forest floor. The night's phloem flow ties all these processes together, weaving the forest's body into a single living whole. If the forest's daytime work is about making, then its nighttime work is about moving, distributing the products of the day to where they are needed most. This movement happens without waste, without rush, but with unbroken continuity. It is a reminder that life is not just about the moments of creation, but also about the care taken in placing each resource where it will do the most good. Under the moon, the forest practices this care with patience, one silent river at a time. Beneath the stillness of the canopy, the forest's phloem roads continue their work, winding through every branch, stem and root like threads in a living tapestry. To understand the full beauty of this nocturnal transport, it helps to imagine the forest not as separate trees, but as a vast interconnected organism. Each tree is a city, and the phloem is its network of streets, carrying sustenance from the bustling market squares of the leaves to the quiet neighbourhoods deep underground. In daylight, these streets are crowded with goods being loaded as fast as they are made. At night, the pace is steadier, more measured, but no less vital. Here in the dark, there is no distraction from the task of distribution. Every molecule of sugar that flows is part of a plan, a precise delivery shaped by the demands of the moment. Inside each sieve tube, the sap is thick with sucrose molecules, the most common sugar moved through the phloem. This is not the sharp sweetness of fruit juice or the quick energy of nectar, but a steady, transportable form of energy. It moves with the push of pressure differences between sources and sinks, guided by a process called the pressure flow hypothesis. At the source, the leaf or storage tissue, sucrose is actively loaded into the sieve tube by companion cells. This high concentration draws in water from nearby xylem vessels through osmosis, building a gentle internal pressure. At the sink, the growing root tip, the swelling bud, the healing wound, the sugar is unloaded, lowering the concentration and allowing water to exit back into the xylem. This difference in pressure from source to sink is enough to drive the flow over remarkable distances without any mechanical pump. The forest at night is filled with these quiet transfers. Roots deep in the soil receive their shipments of sugar and set about their work, growing fine root hairs to explore new spaces between soil particles, forming partnerships with mycorrhizal fungi, and storing energy in the form of starch. These reserves will be tapped later in times of drought or cold, when photosynthesis slows and the tree must live on what it has stored. Even in tropical forests where the seasons are less pronounced, nightly storage acts as a buffer against cloudy days or unexpected stress. In this way, the forest's nighttime phloem flow is a form of resilience, a preparation for uncertainties that may not arrive for months. The sugar travelling in the phloem is not just energy, it is also a building block. At its destination, sucrose can be broken into glucose and fructose, which in turn can be used to make cellulose for cell walls, lipids for membranes, and countless other molecules that keep cells alive and functional. In developing buds, the night's deliveries feed the rapid cell divisions that will unfold into new leaves or flowers. In the cambium layer of the trunk, they support the slow expansion of girth, adding rings of new wood year by year. In roots, they contribute to the production of protective compounds that defend against soil pathogens. Every stop along the phloem route turns these sugars into something uniquely suited to its own needs. This network is also a communication system. Alongside the sugars travel hormones like auxins, gibberellins, and cytokinins, chemical signals that coordinate growth and development. Messages from the roots can inform the canopy about soil moisture, prompting changes in stomatal behavior the next day. Signals from the leaves can tell the roots when to adjust their nutrient uptake. Even electrical signals, travelling more slowly than in animal nerves but still capable of crossing a plant's length in minutes, can use the phloem as a pathway. These signals may carry warnings about insect attacks, triggering the production of defensive chemicals in distant leaves before the danger arrives. At night, when the forest is quieter, such signals can travel without interference from the day's rapid shifts in photosynthetic activity. The partnership between trees and fungi also leans heavily on these nighttime currents. Mycorrhizal fungi, whose hyphae weave through the soil in a vast underground web, receive sugars from the phloem in exchange for minerals like phosphorus and nitrogen. At night, with less water loss through transpiration, trees may allocate more carbon to these fungal partners, strengthening the network that connects them to other trees. In some forests, these fungal networks allow carbon to move from one tree to another, from a shaded understory sapling to a sunlit giant, or from a healthy adult to a struggling neighbour. The phloem delivers the sugar to the roots, and the fungi carry it onward, extending the reach of the night's rivers far beyond the limits of a single trunk. These exchanges are sensitive to the environment. A warm, still night can accelerate phloem flow, while a cold one slows it. Drought can change the balance between sources and sinks, with more sugar stored in the trunk as a reserve and less sent to the roots for growth. Damage to the leaves during the day may lead to lighter flows at night, as the sources simply have less to give. Yet even in hardship, the forest maintains this movement, reducing but rarely stopping it entirely. To halt the night's rivers would be to starve the tissues that rely on them, to break the cycle that keeps the forest alive. If you could map the phloem flow in a single tree on a moonlit night, you would see a complex, shifting pattern. Multiple sources feeding multiple sinks, some flows strong and others faint, changing hour by hour as the tree's needs change. One branch might send sugar to a cluster of ripening fruits, while another sends it to a growing root cluster. The trunk might act as both a source, releasing stored sugar from the previous day, and a sink, storing new sugar for the next. This flexibility is part of what makes the phloem such a remarkable system. It is not a simple one-way street, but a living, adaptive network. The forest's night rivers are invisible to the eye, but their influence is everywhere. They power the repair of damaged tissues, the growth of new cells, the defense against pathogens, and the quiet exchange with fungal allies. They allow trees to share resources with one another, to survive seasons of scarcity, and to invest in the next day's growth. When you stand beneath the canopy under the moon and feel that the forest is still, you are standing in the midst of one of nature's most constant movements, a flow as vital as any heartbeat. By the time the first light of dawn begins to reach the canopy, much of the night's sugar has reached its destinations. Roots are stocked with energy, buds are primed for opening, and storage cells in trunk and branch are filled. The phloem's work does not stop with the sunrise. During the day, it will continue to move sugars from source to sink, but the rhythm will change, shaped by the constant input of photosynthesis. Night is the time when these rivers run on reserves, drawing on the wealth made in daylight and placing it with care, ensuring that every part of the forest wakes with what it needs to begin again. When night deepens and the forest has settled into its slowest rhythm, the phloem continues its patient labour, moving sugars through every living fibre as though the tree were whispering to itself in a language made of sweetness. This final stage of the night's journey is about more than delivery. It is about readiness. By now, much of the sugar produced during the previous day has been allocated to its destinations, but the flow does not cease. The phloem is still busy transferring resources to places that can store them safely, making sure that when the next day arrives, the tree is not only sustained, but prepared for whatever it may bring. In the deepest hours before dawn, storage becomes a central task. Cells within the roots and lower trunk receive the last shipments from the leaves, converting sucrose into starch for long-term safekeeping. Starch is compact, stable, and can be broken back into sugar whenever energy is needed. It is the forest's reserve currency, tucked away in living vaults where it will not be lost to pests or washed away by rain. This starch may stay in storage for weeks, months, or even years, ready to fuel a burst of spring growth, recover from storm damage, or keep the tree alive during a drought. By day's return, these reserves will be secure, hidden deep beneath bark and soil, protected from the immediate demands of the canopy. The final hours of night are also a time for subtle adjustments in balance. As temperatures dip toward their lowest point, the viscosity of the sap changes, slowing the flow slightly. In response, companion cells at both sources and sinks fine-tune their loading and unloading of sugars, keeping the pressure differences steady enough to maintain movement. This dynamic control ensures that no sink is left wanting and no source is overdrawn. The system is resilient. Even as conditions shift minute by minute, the phloem adapts without hesitation. This adaptability is part of why trees can endure for centuries, through changing climates and shifting seasons, always keeping the inner rivers running. These inner rivers carry more than nutrition. They also bear the plant's quiet messages, chemical signals that arrive in the dark and will shape the day to come. Hormones moving in the phloem can prime buds to break open sooner, or instruct leaves to adjust their future photosynthetic output. Some signals are defensive, preparing tissues for the threat of the insects or pathogens that might return with daylight. Others are developmental, guiding the formation of flowers or the thickening of wood. The night sugar flow is inseparable from this messaging. The resources and the instructions travel together, ensuring that when growth occurs, it does so in the right place and at the right time. Beyond individual trees, the phloem's nighttime work has echoes in the broader forest. In some places, shared mycorrhizal networks link trees of the same or different species, allowing sugar to move indirectly from one organism to another. A shaded sapling that could not make enough sugar during the day may receive a quiet infusion from a nearby elder tree. A tree recovering from injury might be nourished not only by its own reserves, but by its neighbours through this fungal exchange. At night, when transpiration is low and carbon allocation patterns change, these transfers can be more pronounced, strengthening the cooperative web that binds the forest into a community rather than a collection of isolated individuals. As dawn approaches, the phloem's role shifts once more. The internal clocks in the leaves anticipate the coming light, and the first hints of pre-dawn blue begin to filter through the canopy. Sugars will soon be made again in abundance, and the pressure gradients within the phloem will adjust to accommodate the new supply. But the transition is not abrupt. There is a graceful overlap in which the last of the night's stored sugar continues to flow even as the first molecules of daylight-born sugar begin their journey. It is a seamless handoff, like one current merging into another, ensuring that the forest never experiences a true pause in the movement of its lifeblood. By the time the sun's edge rises above the horizon, the night's rivers have accomplished their quiet mission. Roots are fed, storage cells are full, buds are stocked with the energy to open, and the chemical instructions for the day's work have reached their destinations. The phloem will continue to flow, but its nighttime pattern will dissolve into the more complex, variable rhythms of the day. The steady, uninterrupted pace will give way to bursts and pauses dictated by the rise and fall of photosynthesis, by clouds and winds, by the fluctuating demands of growth and repair. What remains is the memory of continuity, the knowledge that even in the absence of sunlight, the forest systems did not sleep in the way we imagine. They shifted their purpose, changing from the work of production to the work of allocation, from the capturing of energy to its thoughtful distribution. This is the unseen half of the forest's existence, a half that is as essential as the bright hours we so easily notice. Without the night's rivers, the day's work would falter. Without this hidden preparation, the morning's surge of life would be unsustainable. In this way, the forest's nighttime phloem flow is a lesson in patience and foresight. It teaches that growth is not just about the moments of visible expansion, but about the quiet, deliberate movements that ensure those moments are possible. It reminds us that beneath the stillness there is always motion, beneath the darkness there is always work, and beneath the bark there is always a living current carrying the memory of sunlight into the places that cannot see the sky. When you next walk beneath the trees in the deep night, imagine those rivers running under your feet and over your head, threading through every trunk, branch, and root. They do not ask for witness, and they make no sound to draw attention. Yet they hold the forest together, link it to its own past and future, and allow it to meet the morning not as something newly alive, but as something that has been alive all along, sustained by the steady pulse of sugar beneath the moon. When darkness settles over the forest and the last colours of sunset fade into deep blue, the tall columns within trees, the xylem, shift their rhythm. In daylight, these vessels are under tension, pulling water upward through the trunk and into the leaves with a force born of evaporation. Each open stoma in the canopy is like a tiny pump, drawing water upward as vapour escapes into the air. But when night comes and stomata close, the pull lessens. The tall chains of water molecules inside the xylem relax, the tension easing, like a rope unwinding. Yet the flow does not stop. In the cool stillness, another force rises from below, the quiet pressure of roots pushing water upward in the absence of the sun. Root pressure is a subtle phenomenon, a lift born of osmotic gradients deep underground. As roots absorb minerals from the soil, the concentration of solutes inside their xylem vessels increases. Water drawn by this difference moves into the roots from the surrounding soil, building pressure within the vessels. Unlike the pull from the leaves in daytime, which can reach astonishing heights through cohesion and tension, root pressure is gentle, pushing water up only a few meters at most. Yet in smaller plants and in the lower sections of larger trees, This pressure is enough to move water into the stem and even force it out through special structures at the edges of leaves. This is the source of guttation, the appearance of clear droplets at leaf tips in the hours before dawn. These drops are not dew condensed from the air, but the plant's own water, enriched with minerals, gently pressed out from within. In the moonlight, guttation can sparkle like tiny stars caught in the foliage. It is a quiet sign that the plant's hydraulic system is alive, that even without the engine of transpiration, water still finds its way upward. The process serves several purposes. It can relieve excess pressure in the roots, keep cells hydrated for night repair work, and in some cases flush out small salts that might otherwise accumulate to harmful levels. Not every plant shows guttation, and not every night brings it. It depends on soil moisture, air humidity, and the plant's own water status. But where it does appear, it is part of the nightly conversation between roots, stems, and leaves. The xylem's night work is not only about movement but about rest. The long columns of water in a tall tree are under great tension during the day, especially in dry or hot weather. This tension can sometimes pull air into the vessels, forming tiny bubbles that block water flow, a problem known as cavitation. At night, when transpiration slows and tensions drop, some of these bubbles can dissolve back into the water, reopening the pathways. This recovery is essential, for too many blocked vessels can weaken a tree's ability to meet the demands of the next day. In this sense, the night is a time of hydraulic healing when the system's efficiency can be restored. The flow of water at night also helps with nutrient distribution. Minerals taken up by the roots during the dark hours are carried upward in the xylem stream, reaching storage tissues and leaves that will use them in the morning. Calcium, for example, moves primarily through the xylem and depends on water flow to reach developing leaves and fruits. Without even the small trickle of nighttime movement, some tissues might face deficiencies. Thus, the nocturnal xylem stream, though slower, is still part of the forest's nutritional heartbeat. If you were to listen to the xylem with sensitive instruments, you might hear faint clicks or pops, acoustic emissions caused by small changes in tension or the collapse and repair of water columns. These sounds, too soft for human ears unaided, are the whispers of the plant's hydraulic life. In a way, they are the xylem's version of breath sounds, evidence that movement and adjustment are ongoing, even in apparent stillness. The interplay between root pressure and the weight of night air also shapes how water behaves. At night, cooler temperatures and reduced wind mean that the air is denser and holds less moisture before reaching saturation. This can create conditions where water vapor condenses more easily on surfaces, adding to the droplets seen in the morning. But for plants, the heavier air also means less evaporative demand. Water loss slows, and tissues can rehydrate after the demands of the day. The water potential within leaves rises, easing strain on cells and allowing repair of membranes and proteins damaged by daytime stresses. This nightly rhythm, tension by day, release by night, is ancient and essential. It ensures that the hydraulic system of the forest remains functional, ready to power the massive daily lift of water that feeds photosynthesis. Without the relief of night, the accumulated strain could lead to more cavitation, more permanent vessel blockages, and a gradual decline in vigor. By allowing time for recovery and redistribution, the forest xylem keeps itself healthy for the long term. From the forest floor, this process is invisible. There is no surface ripple, no audible rush. The trunk stands silent, the leaves barely move. Yet within every stem, from the thinnest twig to the thickest trunk, water is shifting, pressure is equalizing, and the whole hydraulic network is resetting for the dawn. In the cool hours before sunrise, the forest's water columns are at their most relaxed, poised for the next cycle of lifting and releasing. It is a moment of quiet strength, a reminder that even in rest, the forest systems are never truly still. Beneath the still canopy, the night's xylem flow carries on like a slow underground river, unseen but vital. During the day, water is drawn upward almost entirely by the pull of transpiration, evaporation from leaf surfaces creating tension that tugs on water molecules all the way down to the roots. But at night, when the stomata close and transpiration largely ceases, the movement becomes a balance of root pressure and residual flow, each driven by forces far gentler than the daytime lift. This is when the xylem becomes less of a rope under tension and more of a quiet channel, maintaining hydration, distributing minerals, and repairing the invisible wear caused by daylight's demands. In the root tips, the work is unceasing. Cells in the epidermis and cortex draw minerals from the soil through active transport, increasing their internal solute concentration. Water follows these solutes inward through osmosis, swelling the cells and building pressure in the root's vascular tissue. This root pressure pushes water into the xylem, sending it upward, even without the pull from the canopy. In herbaceous plants and small trees, this pressure can be strong enough to exude water from leaf tips or edges, forming guttation droplets that glisten under the moon. These droplets carry dissolved nutrients like potassium, calcium, and nitrate, evidence that the night flow is not just about hydration, but also about nourishment. In taller trees, root pressure alone cannot lift water to the uppermost leaves, but it still plays a role in the lower parts of the plant. It helps refill vessels that may have lost their continuous water column during the day's high tension, dissolving air bubbles that formed when evaporation rates outpaced the tree's ability to supply water. These tiny embolisms can block xylem vessels, reducing efficiency. Nighttime conditions, higher humidity, cooler temperatures, lower tension, allow water to re-enter these blocked channels. This process, though slow, is essential for keeping the hydraulic network functional over time. Without it, vessels would gradually fail and the tree's capacity to move water would decline. The pace of night flow is not uniform. In wetter soils, where root pressure is higher, movement is more pronounced and guttation is more likely. In drier soils, flow is slower, focused on maintaining basic hydration rather than pushing water to the canopy. Some species adapted to arid environments show almost no nighttime xylem movement, conserving every drop in their tissues. Others, in humid tropical forests, may maintain steady low-level flow all night, their systems tuned to the consistent warmth and moisture of their environment. This variety reflects the adaptability of the xylem system, its ability to operate under many different conditions while always serving the same essential function, delivering water and dissolved minerals where they are needed. Minerals moved at night are often destined for growth points. Calcium, which is largely immobile once deposited in plant tissues, relies on xylem flow to reach developing leaves and fruits. A shortage of nighttime movement can mean deficiencies in these rapidly growing parts, leading to visible problems by day. Magnesium, nitrate, and other nutrients also travel in these nocturnal currents, feeding metabolic processes that never fully stop. Even without sunlight, respiration continues, enzymes work and cells repair themselves, all of which require the water and minerals carried in the xylem stream. If you could trace a single molecule of water through the night, you might find it entering the root from a film surrounding a soil particle, slipping past cell walls and membranes, joining others in the central xylem, and then moving slowly upward, perhaps only a few centimeters in an hour. It might reach a storage cell in the stem, where it will rest until called upon for the day's lift, or it might continue toward a leaf, helping restore turgor pressure lost to daytime evaporation. It could even become part of a guttation drop, emerging into the cool night air before dawn. Each molecule's path is unique, but all are part of the same continuous flow that ties the forest's water cycle together. The forest's nighttime hydraulic activity is not isolated from the rest of its systems. The slow upward movement of water also supports the phloem by helping maintain the turgor pressure that drives sugar transport. Without enough water in the system, phloem flow would slow, and the night's distribution of sugars from leaf to root would be compromised. In this way, the xylem and phloem work together, even in the dark, one carrying water and minerals upward, the other carrying sugars and signals downward or sideways. Their coordination ensures that every cell wakes in the morning with both the hydration and the energy it needs. This nightly cooperation has another benefit. It stabilizes the tree's internal temperature and hydration status. By replacing water lost during the day, the xylem helps prevent overnight wilting and allows leaves to begin the next morning fully hydrated. A hydrated leaf can open its stomata more confidently at dawn, maximizing photosynthesis before midday heat increases evaporative stress. This strategic readiness is built silently during the night, each slow-moving column of water setting the stage for the day's productivity. The forest floor offers subtle hints of these inner workings. In some places, you may see early morning droplets on grasses and low plants, some dew from the air, some guttation from within. On certain nights, especially after warm days followed by cool, humid evenings, guttation can be widespread, giving the forest a jeweled look under moonlight. Each drop is a record of pressure and flow, of the root's quiet push against the weight of the night air. By the time the eastern sky begins to pale, the xylem has completed much of its restorative work. Vessels are refilled, tissues rehydrated, minerals delivered, and pressures balanced. Soon the pull from the canopy will return, turning these quiet channels back into high-tension cables that can lift water dozens of meters in a matter of minutes. The transition is seamless, but the foundation is built in the hours of stillness, when the forest's hydraulic system, freed from the urgency of evaporation, can tend to itself and prepare for the challenges of another day. In the deepest hours before dawn, the forest's xylem flow reaches its most tranquil state. The tension that strained the water columns under the hot glare of the previous day has long since eased, and now the vessels stand like calm, full wells in the dim light. The roots maintain their gentle push, sending water upward, not with urgency but with the steady persistence of a heartbeat. It is during these hours that the forest's hydraulic system performs its final tasks before the return of the sun. Tasks that are as much about preservation as they are about preparation. One of these tasks is the final replenishment of leaf water content. Through the day, as stomata open for photosynthesis, these leaves lose significant amounts of water to the air. Even in humid forests, this transpiration creates a measurable drop in leaf turgor pressure. At night, the slow movement of water through the xylem refills these microscopic reservoirs, restoring the rigidity of cells and the smoothness of leaf surfaces. By the time the first photons reach the canopy, most leaves will have regained the firmness they need to open their stomata without risk of damage from low internal pressure. This restoration is one of the quiet miracles of night, a reversal of the day's losses without the help of the sun. At the same time, the xylem carries the last shipments of minerals upward for the night. Calcium, magnesium and nitrate reach their destinations in developing leaves and buds, locking into place in cell walls, or fueling the metabolic repairs that continue through the dark hours. These deliveries are critical, for some nutrients can only move with the flow of water. If the night's currents fail to bring enough, deficiencies will begin to show in the tissues that need them most. This mineral transport ensures that the morning's growth begins not in deficit, but in balance. Another important role of the xylem at night is the gradual healing of embolisms. During the day, when transpiration pull is high, tiny air bubbles can form inside the vessels, breaking the continuity of the water column. In smaller plants, root pressure can be strong enough to push water into these blocked vessels, dissolving the bubbles and restoring flow. In tall trees, where root pressure is insufficient to reach the canopy, the lower sections can still benefit from this process, while the upper parts rely on other mechanisms, such as capillary action in surrounding tissues, to gradually re-establish their hydraulic integrity. Night is the only time when these repairs can proceed unhindered, because the absence of strong transpiration pull allows the water to settle back into place without being torn apart again. The forest's hydraulic cycle is also tied to its overall energy strategy. The slow nighttime flow helps keep storage tissues hydrated, which in turn supports the phloem's pressure-driven transport of sugars. Without adequate hydration, the phloem's rivers would slow, disrupting the delivery of energy from leaves to roots and storage organs. This interdependence means that the xylem's quiet work at night is not an isolated process, but part of a whole system readiness for the day to come. It ensures that water and nutrients will be available exactly where photosynthesis will soon demand them. Some nights bring special conditions that alter this rhythm. A warm, humid night may encourage more guttation, as high root pressure pushes excess water to the edges of leaves. On these mornings, before the dew evaporates, the forest appears to glitter, as though each leaf had caught a fragment of the moon. Other nights, dry and cool, owe the root's osmotic uptake, reducing flow to only what is essential for maintenance. These nights leave less visible trace, but are equally important for conserving resources. In both cases, the forest adapts effortlessly, the xylem's flow shifting to meet the reality of the moment. By the time the first pale streaks of dawn appear in the east, the hydraulic system has completed its night's work. The vessels are full, the roots have shared their minerals, the leaves are plump with water, and the pressure gradients have leveled into a calm equilibrium. As light strengthens, the stomata begin to open, and the day's pull starts to reassert itself. The tension builds gradually at first, then more rapidly as photosynthesis accelerates, drawing water upward at speeds that dwarf the night's gentle pace. But that surge would be impossible without the steady, careful work of the night. The night flow of water in the xylem is not a dramatic process. It does not roar like a river or rush like wind. It is instead a kind of living maintenance, an unseen ritual of balance and renewal that repeats every night of the forest's life. It is the reason a leaf can face the sun each morning without wilting, the reason a bud can swell with new cells, the reason the tallest trees can continue to lift water for decades or centuries. It is one of the quiet systems that make the forest seem eternal. When you walk among trees in those final minutes before sunrise, you're moving through the last moments of this invisible labour. The air is often still, heavy with the sense of soil and leaves. Somewhere beneath your feet, roots are still pushing water upward. Somewhere above, the last guttation drops hang from leaf tips, waiting to fall or be drawn back in. These moments pass without fanfare, but they are as vital as the sunrise itself, for they carry the forest from one day to the next in an unbroken thread of hydration, nutrition, and repair. And so the xylem's night work closes, not with an ending but with a handoff to the day. The push from the roots will remain, now joined by the stronger pull from the canopy. The vessels will again be under tension, the water columns stretched but unbroken, lifting moisture to feed the light-driven machinery in the leaves. And when the sun sinks again and the air cools, the cycle will begin anew, the tension released, the vessels refilled, the minerals lifted, and the forest prepared once more in the quiet, patient language of water. Long before the first light touches the canopy, before even the horizon begins to pale, the forest is already in motion, not because of anything it sees, but because of something it remembers. Every tree, every leaf, every root carries within it a clock, not made of gears or springs, but of molecules that cycle through patterns as regular as the turning of the earth. This is the circadian rhythm of the forest, a hidden metronome that ticks in darkness and in light, allowing plants to anticipate the coming day and prepare for the coming night. It is not a reaction to the moment, but a prediction built into their biology, a way of living in step with the planet's rotation without ever needing to see the sun. Inside the cells of a leaf, certain genes switch on and off in an orderly sequence, producing proteins that rise and fall in concentration over roughly 24 hours. These proteins interact in feedback loops, some activating the expression of other genes, some suppressing it, creating oscillations that continue even in constant darkness. If a plant is kept in unchanging conditions, no dawn, no dusk, no temperature shift, it will still keep time for days or weeks, opening and closing its stomata on schedule, producing and breaking down starch in precise cycles, and adjusting its metabolism to an invisible beat. This is how the forest stays synchronized to the world outside, even when clouds or canopy shade hide the cues. The origins of these rhythms are ancient, tracing back to the first organisms that learned to anticipate the coming of light instead of merely responding to it. For plants, timing is survival. A leaf that opens its stomata at the right moment in the morning can take advantage of cool air and lower evaporation to draw in carbon dioxide before the midday heat forces closure. A flower that opens at night when its pollinators are active saves resources and increases its chances of reproduction. A root that grows most rapidly when the soil is coolest at dawn avoids the stress of midday dryness. All of these patterns depend on the clock, and all attune not only to the length of a day, but to the subtle shifts of seasons. The circadian clock is not a single structure, but a network spread across every cell. Signals from the leaves can adjust the timing in the roots, and signals from the roots can influence the clock in the leaves, creating a whole plant coherence. In some cases, the clock in one part of the plant can run slightly faster or slower than in another, fine-tuning behavior to local conditions. A leaf at the top of the canopy receiving earlier light may begin its day fractionally sooner than a shaded leaf deep below, but both remain in harmony with the overall rhythm of the tree. At night, the clock continues its quiet work, guiding processes that have nothing to do with photosynthesis. The breakdown of starch stored during the day is paced so precisely that reserves are almost but not entirely depleted by dawn. This avoids both running out too soon and leaving unused energy that could have been spent. Hormones such as auxins and gibberellins are released or withheld according to time of night signals, regulating growth in stems, roots, and developing buds. Even the opening and closing of stomata though largely triggered by light and humidity, follows an underlying circadian pattern so that readiness comes before the external cue. The clock also tunes the plant's defenses. Some genes that help protect against herbivores or pathogens are activated more strongly at times when attacks are most likely, based on the plant's evolutionary history. In some species, volatile compounds used to attract pollinators or deter pests are released at predictable hours, matched to the behavior of the animals that respond to them. All of this happens whether or not the plant can see what is coming. The timing is internal, a memory of patterns that have repeated for countless generations. The moon and stars play little direct role in setting this rhythm, though their light can serve as a weak cue for certain species. More important are the transitions between light and dark and the changes in temperature that accompany them. Still in the deep forest where moonlight filters through leaves in shifting fragments, the clock ticks on, indifferent to the brightness of the night. It is a measure not of what is happening now, but of what will happen next, and it allows the forest to move seamlessly from one phase of the day to another without hesitation. When you walk among trees in the pre-dawn darkness, you are moving through a living schedule. Roots are quietly extending in pulses set by their internal timers. Leaves are altering the fluid balance in their guard cells in anticipation of opening to the day. The enzymes that will drive photosynthesis are already aligning themselves for efficiency, even though they will not see a photon for another hour. This is not reaction, it is preparation. A forest waking before it is woken. By the time the first light filters through the canopy, the forest is already ready for it. The night's breathing shifts toward the day's exchange. Starch reserves approach their calculated minimum, and growth hormones redirect their focus from storage to expansion. The clock in every cell has guided these changes, not by waiting for light to tell it what to do, but by knowing that light is coming. And when the sun finally appears, the forest is already in motion, as if the day had begun moments before. Even when the forest is plunged into uninterrupted darkness, when clouds hide the moon and stars and no glimmer of light filters through the canopy, the internal clocks within trees and plants keep turning. This persistence is one of the most remarkable qualities of the circadian rhythm. It does not fade when the cues disappear. The timekeeping is self-sustained, a loop of biochemical interactions that continues to run, almost like a song remembered and sung in perfect time without needing to hear the melody. The leaves, roots, and stems all follow their own versions of this internal music, coordinated but not identical, adjusting slightly to their local environments while remaining bound to the same overall beat. At the core of this system are gene circuits that produce proteins in repeating cycles. Some of these proteins act as activators, switching on genes that start processes such as sugar breakdown or the production of enzymes for photosynthesis. Others act as repressors, turning those same genes off when their task is complete. Together, they create a feedback loop where the abundance of certain molecules rises and falls across roughly 24 hours. Light and temperature shifts adjust the clock, synchronizing it to the true day-night cycle, but once set, the rhythm can continue without external input for a long time. This is why a plant kept in constant darkness for days will still open its stomata and break down starch at the right times. It is not reacting to the light, it is following its own schedule. Different parts of a plant can keep slightly different times. The leaves, directly exposed to light, often lead the rhythm, responding more strongly to dawn and dusk cues. Roots, insulated from these changes, rely more heavily on chemical signals from above to set their clocks. The stems and cambium, lying between, adjust their timing based on both sets of cues. This distributed clock system gives the plant flexibility. If one part is damaged or deprived of information, the others can still function and keep some measure of order until conditions improve. In the forest, where shade and shifting light patterns make direct cues unreliable, the circadian rhythm becomes even more important. A leaf deep in the understory may receive only brief glimpses of sunlight each day, yet it still prepares for them in advance, opening its stomata slightly before the expected time, activating photosynthetic machinery and directing stored sugars toward growth or maintenance according to its internal clock. If it waited until light arrived to begin these processes, it would waste precious minutes, losing efficiency in an environment where light is already scarce. This timing extends beyond photosynthesis. At night, starch made during the day is broken down at a rate precisely calculated to last until dawn. If the night is long, the breakdown is slower. If short, it speeds up. This pacing prevents both running out of reserves too early and leaving unused energy by morning. It is a form of arithmetic encoded in the plant's metabolism, ensuring that every night, regardless of length, the energy supply matches the demand. The clock also governs the release of chemical signals into the air. Some plants emit scents at night to attract pollinators such as moths or bats, opening flowers at the hours when these creatures are most active. Others produce defensive compounds at the times when pests are most likely to feed. These patterns remain consistent even when light cues are removed, showing that they are driven by the internal rhythm rather than by immediate environmental triggers. Temperature can influence the clock's pace, speeding it slightly in warmth and slowing it in cold, but the adjustments are small. This stability allows the rhythm to remain a reliable predictor of environmental changes rather than a direct reaction to them. In a stable climate, the clock's alignment with the external day-night cycle can persist indefinitely, creating a harmony between inner and outer time. In changing conditions, the clock gradually resynchronizes, adapting without losing its essential pattern. Even the way plants respond to stress is tied to the clock. Drought, for example, may cause stomata to close during the day to conserve water, but the underlying rhythm still shapes when they are most likely to open or close. Nutrient uptake, growth spurts in roots, and the allocation of sugars to different tissues all follow schedules shaped by the clock, ensuring that limited resources are used at the times when they will be most effective. If you could look inside a forest at night with a lens tuned to these rhythms, you would see a complex choreography. Leaves in one layer might be shifting their guard cell pressures in preparation for opening. Roots might be accelerating their elongation as their clock enters a phase that favours growth. Certain flowers might be releasing their fragrance right on schedule, even though no insect has yet arrived. Each action is small and quiet, but together they form a web of coordinated behaviour that keeps the forest in balance. This timekeeping is not limited to individual plants. In some cases, populations of the same species can become synchronized across a wide area, their flowering times lining up even when environmental conditions vary slightly from place to place. This collective timing can create mass blooms that overwhelm pollinators, ensuring successful reproduction. It can also trigger synchronized seed release, flooding the environment with food in a single burst, a strategy that both feeds animals and ensures that many seeds survive to grow into the next generation. As the night moves toward its end, the forest clocks are already preparing for the shift. Starch reserves are nearly depleted, photosynthetic enzymes are at the ready, and the internal pressures in leaves are tuned for rapid stomatal opening. The moment dawn arrives, the transition will be smooth, with no lag between the arrival of light and the start of the day's work. This seamless handoff is the result of countless cycles before it, each one reinforcing the alignment between internal time and the turning of the earth. The forest's circadian rhythm is not just a background process. It is the quiet structure holding everything together. Without it, life would still respond to light and dark, but the responses would be slower, less precise, and less efficient. With it, the forest is always one step ahead, ready for what is coming even in the deepest darkness. In the last arc of the night, when the air is still cool and the stars fade toward a faint haze, the forest's circadian rhythm is in its most anticipatory phase. The internal clocks in every cell are aligned toward one goal, meeting the dawn with readiness rather than reaction. By now, starch reserves are nearly spent, but timed to last exactly until the first photons fall. Enzymes essential for photosynthesis are in place, membranes in chloroplasts are tuned for electron flow, and hormone balances are shifting from the slower metabolism of night to the high energy demands of day. This shift is not a scramble, it is an orchestration carried out in silence, as if the forest has been waiting for a cue it already knows by heart. One of the most striking aspects of this final phase is the precision of starch management. The breakdown rate regulated by the clock has been adjusted throughout the night based on the length of darkness anticipated. In winter, when nights stretch long, the degradation is slow and measured. In summer's short nights, it is faster, ensuring nothing is left unused when the light returns. This perfect pacing prevents starvation in the pre-dawn hours, when photosynthesis is still impossible, and maximizes efficiency by avoiding excess storage that could have been fueling repair or growth. Even in sudden changes, when clouds or storms unexpectedly shorten the day or extend the night, the plant recalibrates quickly, aiming to match supply with need as closely as possible. Hormonal signaling in these hours also reflects the clock's influence. Auxin concentrations in certain tissues begin to rise, priming cells for elongation once photosynthesis resumes. Cytokinins may be redirected from storage tissues toward developing buds, readying them for expansion. The balance between growth-promoting gibberellins and growth-restraining abscisic acid begins to tilt toward activity, though not fully until light strengthens. This careful hormonal choreography ensures that growth spurts do not begin too soon, wasting energy before the new day's carbon intake begins, yet they are ready to surge forward without delay. In the roots, the clock guides nutrient uptake cycles, anticipating the water movement that will intensify with daytime transpiration. Certain ion channels become more active, pulling in nitrate, potassium, and other minerals that will be needed in the leaves. These nutrients travel upward with the first strong xylem pull after sunrise, but their journey starts in the dark, coordinated with the rest of the plant's timing so they arrive when demand peaks. In this way, the circadian system ensures that transport processes in different tissues are not just individually efficient but collectively synchronized. Even defensive strategies follow this anticipatory pattern. Some plants increase the concentration of certain defensive compounds just before dawn, a time when herbivorous insects often resume feeding. By having these chemical barriers in place before attacks begin, the plant gains a crucial advantage. Similarly, flowers that will open at daybreak begin shifting water and turgor pressure into their petals in these pre-dawn hours, so that the bloom is ready the moment light arrives, maximizing the window for pollination. The forest as a whole reflects this unseen timing. Birds may begin their first tentative calls slightly before light appears, sensing subtle changes in temperature or responding to their own circadian cues. While animals' rhythms are distinct from plants, they often overlap in ways that shape the ecosystem. Early pollinators may find flowers already open. Leaf-eating insects may encounter fresh growth at its most defended. This overlap of rhythms, different organisms following their own clocks, creates a dynamic web in which each participant is prepared for the other's predictable behaviours. In some species, the circadian rhythm extends to interactions with partners below ground. Mycorrhizal fungi that share nutrients with trees can show activity cycles tied to their host's clock, increasing the transfer of minerals when the tree's phloem is most active at night, and shifting patterns just before dawn in anticipation of new carbon arriving from photosynthesis. These interlinked cycles mean that even organisms without light-sensitive structures can live in time with the day-night rhythm, guided indirectly by the cues of those they are connected to. The final minutes before dawn are a study in quiet readiness. Stomata begin to loosen slightly, not yet fully open but prepared to widen as soon as light strengthens. Water potential in leaves rises to optimal levels for gas exchange. Chlorophyll molecules sit primed in photosystem complexes, ready to capture energy from the first photons. Every piece is in place, the result of an internal schedule that has been running all night, unaffected by whether the moon was bright or hidden, whether stars were visible or clouds blocked them out. When light finally spills across the canopy, the forest does not wake in surprise. It steps into a role it has been rehearsing for hours. The transition is seamless because it began in darkness, guided by clocks that keep perfect time without ticking hands. The circadian rhythm ensures that no energy is wasted in waiting, and no opportunity for growth or survival is lost to hesitation. It is this internal precision, repeated endlessly across every cell, that allows the forest to thrive in an ever-changing world, holding steady to the planet's rotation as if it were a pact made long ago. And when the day's cycle is complete and the sun once again dips behind the horizon, the clock will not stop, it will simply shift to its night phase, setting in motion the next sequence of preparations. In this way, the forest's life is a continuous loop of expectation and fulfillment, darkness and light, each half dependent on the other, each measured not by chance, but by time that lives within.